the big deal. We said this is similar to the 2000 election.
What wasn't it the Boston and the New York?
No, that's much earlier, but yeah, you're good.
The person who didn't get the popular vote was...
Right, it was where the Cleveland had gotten the popular vote, but Harrison got the electoral college vote, okay? Now, they're doing a rematch in 1892. Do you think that people who were pissed off on both sides about that might be energized about re-electing their candidates this time, right? You know, Republicans saying, no, they're not gonna criticize us, we're gonna show that really more people vote for our guy. The Democrats saying, no, we got to make sure he gets the electoral college vote this time because somehow, even though more of us voted for him, the Republican got it. You know, and yet in this election, this highly contested election between two people who previously had served as president in 1892, Weaver gets 8.5% of the popular vote, only starting his campaign in the middle of the year of the election. That's insane. Okay. He got 22 electoral college votes, unheard of, okay? It's just insane. And again, outside of the Bull Moose Party, for a third-party candidate to get 22 electoral college votes, that's crazy. And I mean, when we talk about people like Ralph Nader, or even more importantly, Ross Perot, I mean, why was Ross Perot able to get on the ticket in so many states? Yeah, he was able to buy it, right? He had the money where he could invest and afford to do so.
He owns Texas Insurance, right?
Huh?
He owns TI, right?
I think so. He owns quite a few things. Although it was funny. One of the best Jay Leno jokes I ever heard was they said when they were doing the Windows 95 launch, and they were talking about Windows 95, and Jay Leno came out and he said, you know, you can tell that Bill Gates is rich. His chauffeur is Ross Perot. You know, and so no. You had to be alive then, okay.
We'll never quote Jay Leno, he's not really funny.
Oh, okay. Well, I just thought you were just saying don't do jokes, they're not that funny. Which is probably true too. But anyway, yeah, I guess that wasn't topical for your generation, was it? Okay. Yeah.
Wait, we were supposed to laugh at that?
Oh, thank you. Yes, because that was what was needed to turn the knife. Thank you. The relative silence of the lack of humor needed that. Yes. Okay. Oh, thank God I get to grade people's tests when I go home. Okay. Anyway.
Mr. Janelle.
Yeah.
At least someone here is funny.
Thank you. I got my back. Okay. So anyway, I don't know if I just said that was a good thing or if I was just clearing in a gesture, but that was all right. Anyway, the point is, so what? The populist one. Let's move on. So they were obviously hugely successful. They're considered one of our first really big grassroots movements, and we have. It's hard to. Everybody wants to copy grassroots movements, but it's really hard to do nowadays because so much of it's done by the media, or even what they call what's phony grassroots, when you have corporations paying for things and it looks like it's coming from the ground up, but it's really just hired people doing it. Has anybody heard that phrase before? Do you know what grassroots is to begin with, that phrase? Okay.
Or you like try to go establish something, right? So
yeah, it's where you establish something from the ground up, okay? When you have organizations, this is usually political organizations, but also when you're trying to get buzz for a product or whatever, you try and get it from the grassroots, get lots of individual people and then build it from the ground up, okay? But there's also something they call astroturfing, which is the opposite of that, where this is like where you get hot-looking girls to come into clubs and they buy this particular drink, and they try and encourage people, and they try and make it sexy to buy this particular drink, and they're actually paid to be there and be sexy and get people that particular drink in order to build brand name. I don't know, have you heard about this happening in clubs or all that? I'm not a club person, but I'm interested by that. Also, same thing, if you ever go on these websites that supposedly, where like some of the Amazon.com or the ratings on Amazon, and what's happening, advertising companies are gaming them, or friends are coming in and putting these in simply in order to create phony ratings. That's what we call astroturfing, okay? It's phony grassroots organizations. And so it's hard to see that, but clearly there wasn't, I mean, the farmers, what did they not have? They didn't have money, okay? They did not have it, so this was the real deal. And every organization that's come up that's been big-time organization, whether it was some of the organizations that helped Barack Obama get elected, whether it's been the Tea Party movement, that sometimes they would say this is grassroots organization. Nowadays, there's also criticisms that say, well, no, this is really astroturfing. This is rich people that are organizing these and paying the media to make them look like they're from the bottom up, but they're really from the top down. Okay, so those are things that we still see today in terms of arguments. So what was it they were after? They had a number of political platforms, some of which are a little bit confusing. The first thing they wanted was sub-treasuries. Basically, one of the things that they said is, let's take the economic model that the Farmers Alliance is saying, but let's make the government do it. I mean, after all, if the government's willing to help the railroads, right, they gave them free land and all that. If they're willing to help the corporations, I mean, agriculture is an organization, isn't it, right? It's a kind of corporation. Why shouldn't we be helped too? Why should it only be the guys in the cities that are getting the help from the government? So the sub-treasuries were an idea. Remember how I said this marketing cooperative where they'd hold the grain until the price went up, right? The sub-treasury said, instead, let's submit our grain to the government. The government would create these warehouses called sub-treasuries. And then they would hold on to the grain in these warehouses until such time that the price went up. And then the government would release the grain, allowing it to be sold at the higher price. So it's basically the government helping, increase the prices of agriculture. That was the sub-treasury idea. They also wanted to abolish national banks. They felt that national banks were, to use an internet phrase, the evil. Okay. Why did they say that the banks were so bad? They said local banks were okay, but the national banks were the ones that were charging these high interest rates and really gouging the farmers. And abolishing the national banks and making them all local state banks would be the winner prize. Number three, they wanted to get rid of absentee land ownership. Now this one actually, let's think about for a second. They don't mean that you can't buy land and then you have to live on it, because obviously some people are going to have property they don't live on all the time. When they're saying absentee land ownership, they were speaking specifically about farmland and working on farmland. What they wanted as a law was that if farmland was being worked on by farmers, and if the owner of that land was not one of the people who's working the land, then over time, that owner would have to offer to sell that land to the farmers who worked on it.
So pretty much if the owner is not doing the farming himself.
Right. If he's not doing the farming or part of the farming group, then he would eventually have to sell it to the farmers,
okay,
or in some ways become one of the farmers, that sort of thing, or quit farming. Who is this taking a shot at? What two groups are doing this?
Plantation owners?
Well, they're not plantations anymore, but you're close. The plantation owners have become landholders that were doing what in the South? Sharecroppers, okay? Because what this would say with sharecroppers is that now that you couldn't sharecrop anymore, you had to sell the land to the sharecroppers, okay? You couldn't just rent it. Okay. Well, the reason, think about it, because a lot of people felt that most people were not going to be getting the chance to own the land. The land had been owned by these rich guys who already had a monopoly on it.
Oh, okay.
And so as a result, they're saying, we're doing all the work on the land, but we're not even allowed to own it, and then the person can still kick us off later if they want to. And so why not give us the chance to do so? If you're not going to work the land, you shouldn't have the right to have it. That's their thought.
So it pretty much promoted the free market, would it do?
No, because, on the one hand, if they say promote the free market, then the free market is if you own the land, you have the right to actually make people work on it, and the government shouldn't take it away. That would be the other argument that would say that it's, some might say it's anti-free market, some might say it's pro, like,
right,
whichever.
But the bottom line, it just stops monopoly with us.
Kind of, yeah, that's what they're after.
Okay.
They're after non-farmers owning farmland. Okay, their goal is with this law to have individual farms owned by families. That's the goal.
Right.
Okay, and the same thing. This was after corporate farming, because again, remember how we said that this idea of factories in the fields, they're busing in immigrants effectively. No, not busing, railing in railroads, taking in immigrants, having them work on these farms, but they don't really own the farms. Again, the idea is to incorporate farming, was to make it actually so it's lower about individual farmers. That's what they were after with this absentee land ownership thing. They also wanted to direct election of senators. Now this seems unusual because, let's face it, how do we elect senators today? We vote on them directly, right? But that wasn't always the case. For those who weren't students of my 101, this may shock you, but we did not originally elect our senators. The most powerful members of the legislative branch were not voted on by the people. Who got to select them? Does anyone know? My 101s remember? Probably not. Oh, come on, y'all are supposed to have my back. Okay.